All right, guys, it's Jerningam here. I bet most of you guys are probably and people are probably sick of hearing about Brexit in the UK or Northern Ireland or Scotland and Wales. Or there's probably people that don't know about Brexit. Um, this is ridiculous. It says here on the TV, as I'll show you. It says there on the television, get back branches MPs control of parliamentary times tomorrow to pass legislations of did at providing a no deal Brexit, okay? But the thing is, the ayes have it, and the noes don't have it at all for no deal. And it says here, MPs are voting on Bird to take back control of Parliament. Business tomorrow, today, temper to block no deal Brexit. Me being British as I am British and everybody else and most people, you want to leave the EU. But some people want a deal in Brexit and the Remainers want to stay in. Like the, word I'm looking for. I'm trying to put it nicely, as one would say. Not everybody follows Parliament, but I do. I like to know what's going on in my own country, as most people. And sometimes they keep us in the dark when they're telling us stuff. Boris Johnson wants to get out of the EU, and then the EU won't do a trade deal with Boris Johnson. Then Boris Johnson's trying to get a trade deal. Then Donald Trump wants to team up with Boris Johnson and get a trade deal for America. So it's like this. It's like lifting weights up. Nobody knows what's going on. It's like up and down in the Parliament. Jeremy Corbyn is trying his best to stop no deal with his friends. Boris Johnson doesn't like that. And Jeremy Corbyn's a Labour leader. He's one of those people what shouts at the back of the room. Some people follow Labour, some people follow Conservatives, some people follow Greens, some people follow MPs and Democrats, so on. I prefer Conservative. Nigel Farage is a bit like Conservative. But anyway, it's just annoying that this Brexit thing, we seem to be going around in a circle. We voted in 2016 to leave the European Union, but the MPs don't want to leave. You know what I mean? And then there's a lot of talking about it. It's ridiculous. And then they talk about war and they talk about everything else to do with it. If you leave the EU with no deal, you have food shortages and water shortages. It's not necessarily true. They're just trying to do scaremongering and putting people off from leaving. I've got an itchy bloody nose as well. I'm going to let you guys watch the video and let you decide on what you think about the video. Anyway, hope you all enjoy.
Order. The ayes to the right, 328. The noes to the left, 301. Not a good start, Boris. Order. The ayes to the right, 328. The noes to the left, 301. So the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Unlock. Another Burko's people.
So I'm going to beat them for the government. Only the second appearance of Boris Johnson in the House of Commons. Let's listen to him.
Mr. Speaker, about the consequences of this vote tonight, it means that Parliament is on the brink of wrecking any deal that we might be able to strike in Brussels, because tomorrow's bill would hand control of the negotiations to the EU, and that would mean more dither, more delay, and more confusion. And it would mean that the EU themselves would be able to decide how long to keep this country in the EU. And since I refuse to go along with that plan, we are going to have to make a choice, Mr. Speaker. I don't want an election. The public don't want an election. I don't believe the right honourable gentleman wants an election. But if the House votes for this bill tomorrow, the public will have to choose who goes to Brussels on October the 17th to sort this out and take this country forward. Everybody knows that if the right honourable gentleman is the Prime Minister, he will go to Brussels and beg for an extension. He will accept, you will accept whatever Brussels demands, and we will have years more arguments over Brexit. And by contrast, Mr. Speaker, everyone knows that if this government is in charge and if I go to Brussels, I will go for a deal, and I believe I will get a deal. Anyway, even if we don't, we will leave anyway on October the 31st. The people of this country will have to choose, Mr. Speaker. The Leader of the Opposition has been begging for an election for 2 years. He has crowds of supporters outside calling for an election. I don't want an election, but if MPs vote tomorrow to stop negotiations and to compel another pointless delay to Brexit, potentially for years, then that would be the only way to resolve this. And I can confirm that we are tonight tabling a motion under the Fixed Term Parliament. Thank you.
Point of order, Jeremy Corbyn.
Mr. Speaker, on a point of order, I welcome tonight's vote. We live in a parliamentary democracy. We do not have a presidency, but a Prime Minister. Prime Ministers govern with the consent of the House of Commons, representing the people in whom the sovereignty rests. There is no consent. There is no consent in this House to leave the European Union without a deal.
Jeremy Corbyn always talks rubbish. He's a pro-Labour Remainer. He's not a leaver.
As I've said before,
Second
if the Prime Minister
referendums.
has the confidence in his Brexit policy, when he has one he can put forward, he should put it before the people in a public vote. And so, he wants to table a motion for a general election. Fine. Get the bill through first in order to take no deal off the table.
See, guys, it's kicking off in Parliament. I mean, if you guys don't follow Parliament, you'll know what I'm saying. It's ridiculous. I mean, it's just really annoying. I don't know if it's sad, guys, but it really pisses you off. If you guys follow Labour or follow like politics, you understand what I'm trying to say. Bloody ridiculous.
Well, now Boris Johnson has made it a cornerstone of his premiership that he is prepared to leave the EU without a deal. But what impact could that have? A major new report released today by King's College London brings together what government modelling and its own analysis predict could happen in the immediate aftermath as well as the weeks ahead. The number of lorries with the correct paperwork to enable them to cross the channel could halve within a day, whilst disruption to imports mean there could be a shortage of some fresh foods, fruit, vegetables and poultry within a fortnight. Direct rule of Northern Ireland could be reimposed and 40,000 jobs would be put at risk as a consequence of no deal. And the government predicts that a no-deal Brexit would reduce the UK's growth by 8% over the next 15 years, compared with staying in the European Union. The report concludes the impact of a no-deal Brexit will be significant, damaging and long-lasting. Well, joining us now is the lead author of the report, Professor Arnhem Menon, who's from King's College, London, and John Mills, businessman, former chairman of Vote Leave. Professor Menon, what enables you to give such specific figures? I mean, to say 15 years is a very specific number.
Well, the specific figure we give, about 8% over 15 years, is from the government's own estimates, so we quote them as such. So what we're saying is, we think that ultimately the clearest evidence of the economic damage of no deal is over the long term, because over the short to medium term, it's relatively hard to know what precisely happens, who puts controls at when, what level tariffs might be that we impose. Over the longer term, what we're clear about is all things being equal, and that's an important rider, our GDP will be smaller than it would have been had we stayed in the European Union. Now, that doesn't mean that other things won't intervene, changes to productivity, government policies here that can help our GDP, but we're just saying, looking at that one single thing, making trade significantly harder with your nearest and largest trading partner is going to have a negative impact.
John Mills, would you go so far as to say that leaving without a deal is not a good idea, according to these figures?
Well, I think we're in a rock and a hard place. I don't think we've got any easy options now. And I think the government's strategy of saying that they'd be prepared to contemplate a no deal to get something better does make some sense. Now, whether that strategy is going to work, whether it's going to come to fruition, I think it remains to be seen. And I think the situation is wobbling at the moment, so it's not certain that it will.
Now, do you suspect the professor has gone off the edge, or is he right in the heart of it there?
Well, I think that there's an enormous question about what assumptions you use to produce the results. I mean, for example, saying what's going to happen in 15 years' time is really, I think, very, very sort of risky.
What about lorries with paperwork? That seems pretty obvious that the likelihood of everybody having the right paperwork and the rest of it the day after we leave is very small indeed.
But that's something that is under the British government's control. And what HMRC have said very clearly is what they'll do is give priority to getting the goods through, getting the lorries moving rather than getting hung up on paperwork. And this must be the most sensible thing to do.
Have you factored that in? Or?
Well, I'd say let me say three things. Firstly, on the forecasts themselves, we're very, very careful in the report to hedge what we say by saying, look, these are forecasts, they're not predictions. All sorts of other intervening things can happen in the next 15 years. We're not saying what the British economy will look like. We're saying that basically the impact of not being in the single market and the customs union will be deleterious to around that effect. On the trucks, it's absolutely true, as John says, that the British government has made a clear decision to prioritise flow over revenue. That is to say, we're going to keep things moving, even if it means we're not collecting the full tariff. The EU, and there's two sides to every border, has not said that. And that's the issue, is that whatever the British government does, for our things to move across that border, and indeed for our things to come back in over that border, the EU have got to play ball too. And what they've said very, very clearly is we will be imposing the checks and the tariffs. The tariffs are less important than the checks in many ways from day one. If they can actually do that, it will have an immediate effect. But bear in mind, I'll just say one more thing. There's a lot of contingency here. The 1st of November is a public holiday in France. So that lorries are not allowed on public motorways in France on the 1st of November. So no one's expecting Armageddon on the first day. What we're saying, though, is that as these things kick in, there will be an impact.
Well, I mean, that does sound pretty irrefutable.
Oh, I'm not sure it is. I mean, first of all, I don't think it... I've had years and years of experience of export paperwork, and it's not that difficult to do it. I'm sure some of the lorries that turn up won't have the paperwork in exactly the form it should be, and I understand they're going to be shunted on one side. While all the ones who have got the paperwork...
But if there's no deal, if there is a deal, then presumably there'll be all sorts of things like that will be sorted out. This is surely a document which actually deals with the question of no deal.
Yes, I think that's fine. I mean, I think Anna's absolutely right in saying that if there's no deal and tariffs are imposed straight away, that is going to cause some problems and hiccups. And I think the issue is...
So as a businessman, you might perhaps say to Boris Johnson, don't do it.
Well, I think nobody really wants no deal at all. Right across the spectrum, nobody wants no deal. But I do think the problem is if you're not prepared to walk away from a really bad deal, you finish up with one that's even worse. That's the dilemma we're facing.
Well, John Mills, Professor Adamant, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Well, what could one say? What could one say about this world? This can be ridiculous at times.
As a channel, we've spent a whole lot of time explaining Brexit, which makes sense considering our main series is called, well, explaining.
I've already seen that video before, so I'm going to try and find a different video. It's just ridiculous in my opinion, but what could one say? I'm doing a lot of tutting today, guys, because I'm pissed off. It's been nice to just get our own borders back in our country, but no, They don't want to do it.
Prince Harry was bound to face questions after his summer break. How was your holiday? He's been criticised for using private jets, so launching
Prince
an
Harry.
eco-tourism project in Amsterdam seemed bizarre.
I've learned that we cannot dismiss the idea of trying to do something just because we can't do everything. We can all do better, and while no one is perfect, we all have a responsibility for our own individual impact.
But the question of whether he's personally doing enough wasn't going away.
I spend 99% of my life travelling the world by commercial. Occasionally there needs to be an opportunity based on a unique circumstance to ensure that my family are safe.
Harry and Meghan have faced a summer of negative headlines for flying privately to holiday in France and Ibiza, described as hypocritical considering their environmental campaigning. In Amsterdam, other visitors were sceptical of Harry's intentions.
You have to be the role model for it. You can't only talk, you have to take action also.
It's completely hypocritical. We're from California, so we understand the whole green initiative, and we have a lot of the same things going on politically within our state as well. A lot of people saying they want one thing, but doing exactly the opposite.
He'd flown on a commercial plane to launch Travelist, a sustainable travel project with some of the biggest names in the industry. Campaigners say it is a start.
Everybody needs to lead by example in every industry, in every area, and our number one demand is for the government to tell the truth about climate emergency, and a lot of the responsibility I feel lies there. If people just aren't aware of the scale of what we're facing and still thinking about small initiatives really and innovations to try and help people, but it's so much bigger than that.
I've travelled with Prince Harry on many royal tours, and the eco-tourism message isn't anything new. Now he's married and travelling with a family, there is greater scrutiny on the causes that he decides to promote, and also the choices that they make in the lifestyle they lead and the ways that they travel. There is no doubt that Prince Harry attracts attention, and the criticism he's faced will bring more attention to this eco-tourism venture. There will be many who still expect him to do more and lead by example. Rhiannon Mills, Sky News in Amsterdam.
Wow. Goes to show, doesn't it, guys, that these Remainers just don't want to leave the EU. Ridiculous.
I believe for three reasons. They can see that we want a deal. They can see that we have a clear vision for our future relationship with the EU, something that has not always perhaps been the case. And they can see that we are utterly determined to strengthen our position by getting ready to come out, regardless, come what may. But if there's one thing
it kind of annoys me that they say October we're leaving, and now Boris Johnson's saying come what may.
MPs may find some way to cancel the referendum, or that tomorrow MPs will vote with Jeremy Corbyn for yet another pointless delay. I don't think they will. I hope that they won't. But if they do, they will plainly chop the legs out from under the UK position and make any further negotiation absolutely impossible. And so I say, to show our friends in Brussels that we are united in our purpose, MPs should vote with the government against Corbyn's pointless delay. I want everybody to know there are no circumstances in which I will ask Brussels to delay. We're leaving on the 31st of October, no ifs or buts. We will not accept any attempt to go back on our promises or scrub that referendum. And armed and fortified with that conviction, I believe we will get a deal at that crucial summit in October, a deal that Parliament will certainly be able to scrutinise. And in the meantime, let's let our negotiators get on with their work without that sword of Damocles over their necks and without an election. Without an election. I don't want an election. You don't want an election. Let's get on with the people's agenda, fighting crime, improving the NHS, boosting schools, cutting the cost of living, unlocking talent and opportunity across the entire United Kingdom with infrastructure, education and technology. It is a massive agenda. Let's come together and get it done, and let's get Brexit done by October the 31st. Thank you very much.
I'm just hoping Boris Johnson's not doing the same thing as Theresa May, when she kept promising a deal and then 108 times of leaving it here on 9th of March in 2000, last year. Just thinking of something else then. Got a really itchy bloody nose, man. I keep itching my nose. I had a shave yesterday, guys, you can tell. Well, the day before. This bloody beard keeps itching. The thing is, it just keeps growing bloody back. Dear me, the things we do in this country, eh? There's a lot of things going in Hong Kong at the minute, guys, as well.
The role of the police and protesters, now very much under the microscope in Hong Kong. There have been violent arrests and what appear to be indiscriminate beatings. They make unsettling viewing, with repeated claims of police brutality and sexual intimidation. The arrest of key pro-democracy activists, including Agnes Chow and Joshua Wong, days ago, on the eve of a banned rally, has incensed Hong Kongers. We met Agnes Chow, who's still a student, away from the crowds. She now faces jail, charged with taking part in an unauthorized demonstration.
After I was arrested in the police station, during the check, the body check, I was also forced to take off my trousers, and my charges are not something about hiding drugs or anything like that. My charges is getting involved in protests.
Sounds pretty intimidating, though.
Yes, and I believe that these kinds of sexual harassment or this kind of violence attack from the police would continue in this movement or even in the future Hong Kong, because the Hong Kong government keeps on avoiding the responsibility to have an independent investigation.
The police have frequently used pepper spray. Human rights groups want an investigation into actions like these. The firing of tear gas indoors. Amnesty International called these horrifying and unlawful acts. And Hong Kong's chief executive appears tortured by what's going on in her country. In an audio recording which has just emerged, she's heard telling business people she's caused unforgivable havoc.
It's just unforgivable. If I have a choice, the first thing is to quit. Having made a deep apology is to step down.
The recent movement of Chinese troops on the streets of Hong Kong has raised worries that Beijing might use their army, the PLA, to crush the protests. Carrie Lam insists not.
Another thing I want to assure you that is my own feeling the pulse and through discussions. CDG has absolutely no plan to stay in the PLA.
But these images have disturbed many around the world. The police are facing increasingly violent protesters who are using petrol bombs more and more frequently. They're building barricades and fires, and indulging in wanton vandalism. We managed to persuade some of the hardcore protesters to speak to us.
I think that when compared to the brutal force of the government and police, I think it's totally justifiable.
I think for this stage, certain balance is needed.
They fight people with no reason, they touch people with no reason, and they are not police anymore, I think, because police is for protect the people.
The gulf between the two sides seems as far away as ever.
Agree with that one. The police should be doing is protecting people instead of doing that sort of thing. Bloody annoying TV programmes and all sorts of chaos in the world.
They built layers of barricades around Hong Kong's airport, thousands of them, blocking all the routes in and out for most of the day. A legal injunction meant to stop demonstrators from entering the airport made not a jot of difference. Instead, they made a mockery of the law, building walls out of whatever they could lay their hands on. Inside, airport security struggled to track down anyone suspected of being a protester. Tensions are high. Riot police kept most from entering the terminal itself, but this campaign of civil disobedience is taking many forms. Travellers had to walk miles, with about 40 flights cancelled and many missing them altogether.
I know, stand with Hong Kong. They have a right to group. Are you worried about the delay?
I think I'm gonna miss my flight.
By the time the police arrived in numbers, the airport had already been seriously disrupted. The protesters immediately withdrew, walking to Tun Chung, the nearest town to the airport. And inside the subway station, they set about tearing it apart. Ticket machines were smashed, and the control room attacked. Many of them used their umbrellas to protect their identities. This was mob rule. Riot police stormed trains searching for demonstrators, whilst parents shielded their children. It was over in a flash, but they brought terrible damage to the station.
Things have really taken a turn for the worse. A serious amount of destruction. Look at the terminals getting into the train station. They flooded the area with water. They broke into a fire extinguisher and they trashed everything.
Everywhere the protesters went, they built barricades to try to slow the progress of the police. And a nearby construction site provided them with plenty of materials. In one corner, they were turning traffic signs into shields. Several barricades were set alight. The pro-democracy protests are not going away. The police do not seem to be able to get a grip of this rising anarchy, arriving at the station hours afterwards with no protester in sight. There's a lot of anger towards the police too. Those of boos and jeers from the residents as the police leave the station, and the demonstrators are getting increasingly angry and violent as the frustration grows. Alex Clifford, Sky News, Hong Kong.
Goes to show, guys, I don't know if my thing's just glitched out on me. I could have done. Yeah, it says try later. The internet's just gone off. And now it's come back on again. I don't understand. There you go. See, the internet's just switched itself off. Unavailable. So I don't know what's going on. I was just filming something and now it's just gone off. DNS error, as you guys can see that. Even though I was trying to film something for YouTube, and I'm getting very sick of these DNS errors on the PlayStation. If you guys get the same thing, it's very annoying. I may have to set the internet box again. I mean, usually when it does this, oh, there you go. See that thing there, guys? It's not see-through white. The status should be see-through like the rest of them, you can see. There you go. I think it's back on, I don't know. May have had a bit of a blip, I think. Yeah, there we go. It's back on again. It's annoying when it does that. Reloading YouTube back up. Right, so I'm back on it again. Okay, YouTube. More protesting in Hong Kong 3 days ago. The other one was 1 day ago and 2.
They turned out in their thousands, despite this rally being banned. Young and old, even children were there. They weren't going to stop demanding democracy. But there was evident anger and frustration. A billboard marking the 70th anniversary of communist rule in China was ripped down, and all along the way they sprayed graffiti.
If they suppress us more, we'll resist more. And if they try to kill us with the rebels, just let us burn together.
And it didn't take long for that to happen. This is the seat of the Hong Kong government. There's a lot of anger over how the authorities have handled this, and this is the 13th consecutive week of protests, with them getting ever more violent. The water cannon used this time had blue dye to stain protesters who could be picked up later.
The protesters and the demonstrators taking part in this seem to be getting more and more hardened and more determined and more angry.
The protesters handed out rocks to throw at the police. We saw them using catapults to aim marbles. And they threw back gas canisters fired in their direction, as well as lobbed petrol bombs. Streets in the heart of this, one of the world's leading financial hubs, were shut down as astonished tourists and shoppers looked on aghast at the scenes unfolding in front of them. Time and again, the protesters were able to outwit the police, at one stage building and setting alight a large barricade around the corner from the police headquarters.
This has been a tactic. They've moved around. The demonstrators, they hit something quickly and then move to a different area. And it's quite difficult to police. Well, master of the understatement, it's extremely difficult to police.
The authorities struggled to bring the situation under control as pictures of Hong Kong burning swept around the world. In this video we were given, protesters claim the men in black are undercover police officers mingling with demonstrators. The protesters say 2 live rounds were fired into the air, claims we can't verify. Then the riot police, led by a small contingent of British officers, moved in en masse. And they were determined to make some arrests. This is what many protesters fear most, with repeated claims of police brutality and sexual violence against the women once they're out of sight of witnesses.
I don't know what's happening here. They're checking whether they are media, because people have been masquerading as media. Why are you questioning him? Why
I have to check his identity, right?
Right? No, he's clearly marked as press. He's clearly marked as press.
If he makes case
Good.
press and otherwise it's press, is it possible? Yes or no?
Are you getting control of the street?
At this stage, no they weren't. So they went on the offensive. And as protesters headed for a train station, this happened. The sight of young people cowering, begging not to be hit by police, is not a good look for Hong Kong. This was a very black day for Hong Kong. And the violence is escalating on both sides, with no end in sight, and the situation getting more and more out of control. Alex Crawford, Sky News.
Well, the other day it did, yeah. Just cuts out. I don't know. I mean, a lot of people have. Here's a new Ghost Recon beta.
Wolves. By tooth and claw, I took this island, and by tooth and claw, I will rule it. call him a lone wolf? Maybe. But there is no place for the weak and the wounded here.
Pre-order now for Xbox One.
Right.
The Strait of Hormuz is now the most militarized stretch of water in the world.
Is it?
Commercially, it is also one of the busiest. American and British warships are now escorting cargo vessels through the strait every single day. We travelled with HMS Montrose when she picked up 3 tankers heading towards Dubai.
We're fishing silvery miles outside of the raging South-Dubai waters, and when HMS Montrose started to position herself between the Iranian coast and the tankers that she's now escorting, and they'll stay like that through the Strait of Hormuz, essentially until they're out of harm's way.
In Montrose's operations room, they track every ship in the area and watch out for incoming Iranian fast boats. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard's navy hides many of its boats behind some of the little islands dotted around the region. On this occasion, we are being watched and followed by an Iranian drone overhead. The two sides interact every day. At times, it has got hairy. On July the 10th, Iranian gunboats tried to board a UK-flagged tanker, the British Heritage. HMS Montrose was nearby, and she intervened.
They were driving on us pretty quickly, and there were multiple small craft, and so our key output was just making sure that we could block them in whatever way possible, so that if we needed to, we had weapon arms to engage if we were required to do that.
Shots weren't fired that evening, but it was a close-run thing.
My mission was to protect British shipping, so I knew there was no way those Iranian gunboats were going to get on board that ship that night. So as I turned up 150 yards on a port quarter, all my weapon systems were trained onto them to let them know that, quite frankly, I was in a legal position to ensure they weren't going to get on board. And thankfully, we were able to find a compromise where we could de-escalate the situation. But yeah, I won't lie, it was pretty close.
9 days later, the Stena Impero was successfully captured. The ship and her crew remain in an Iranian port. It has now been revealed as well that the Iranian Navy and Revolutionary Guard were specifically asking
He'll get
commercial
like
ships
cut it out and
time
stuff
if
now and then.
any British
So it
crew
keeps
on
going
board.
blank.
They were deliberately targeting
Not
Britain
you keep losing
and its commercial
your
shipping
brain or
interests.
something.
The UK government is
Well,
now
you're not in a coma, I
considering
don't think,
sending
anyway.
drones to the region. These waters are as important as they
I
are
don't think you're in a
dangerous,
coma, no.
and Britain has put itself right in the centre of this crisis.
There's a
Now,
film
it's
called
one
That
of the
Life
Sky
on
News
Mars.
in the Gulf.
If you've ever seen it, it's a very good film. Life, it's a comedy, yeah. Let's have a look and see if we can find any more news. I may just leave it in this video for now, guys, and do another one later. And like I say, I hope you all enjoyed it. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share the videos with your friends. And I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace. See you later. Take it easy, guys.